What happens when America's most beloved actor, the man who has defined decency and integrity for an entire generation, finally reaches his absolute breaking point on live national television? What we witnessed on The View wasn't just a heated exchange or a tense moment, it was the complete and utter dismantling of a talk show host who made the catastrophic mistake of attacking the one person in Hollywood that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, should ever dare to provoke. This confrontation has sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry, dominated social media for days, and fundamentally changed how we think about celebrity interviews. By the time you finish reading this account, you'll understand exactly why Tom Hanks, the man who has spent 4 decades being the nicest person in show business, absolutely detonated on national television in the most legendary takedown in talk show history. The morning started like any other taping of The View. The familiar set gleamed under the studio lights, the iconic table positioned perfectly for the cameras, and the audience filed in with their usual enthusiasm. The production assistants scurried around making final adjustments, the makeup artists added last-minute touches, and the co-hosts reviewed their notes while sipping coffee from their signature mugs. Joy Behar sat in her customary seat, tapping her pen rhythmically against her notepad, that familiar expression on her face, the one that regular viewers recognized immediately as the look of someone preparing to stir up controversy. She had that predatory energy, that barely contained eagerness that signaled she was loaded up for something big. The other hosts chatted pleasantly among themselves, laughing at some behind-the-scenes joke, completely unaware that they were about to witness television history. When Tom Hanks walked onto the set, the audience erupted. This wasn't polite applause, this was a standing ovation that lasted nearly 30 seconds. A spontaneous outpouring of genuine affection for a man who had become synonymous with everything good about American cinema. He looked exactly as you'd expect Tom Hanks to look: comfortable, approachable, wearing a casual blazer over a simple shirt, that trademark smile radiating warmth and humility. He waved to the audience with genuine appreciation, not the calculated gesture of someone working a crowd, but the authentic acknowledgement of someone who truly appreciated their support. As he made his way to the guest chair, he paused to shake hands with each of the co-hosts, exchanging warm greetings and brief pleasantries that spoke to years of professional relationships and mutual respect. Tom Hanks, ladies and gentlemen, Whoopi Goldberg announced as the applause finally died down, her voice carrying genuine warmth. We are so thrilled to have you here with us today. The pleasure is entirely mine, Tom replied, settling into his chair with the ease of someone who had done thousands of interviews over his illustrious career. I always enjoy coming to The View. You ladies make me feel right at home. The interview began beautifully, flowing with the natural rhythm of practiced conversationalists. They discussed his latest film project, a heartwarming drama about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, the kind of story that Tom had built his career on telling. He spoke passionately about working with the young actors in the film, about how their fresh perspectives had challenged him to think differently about his craft. He shared behind-the-scenes anecdotes that had the audience laughing, talked about his lifelong love of typewriters with childlike enthusiasm, and discussed his production company's commitment to telling diverse stories that reflected the real America. Sonny Hostin asked about his preparation process, and Tom launched into a thoughtful explanation about research and empathy, about the responsibility actors have to honor the real people they portray. Sarah Haynes wanted to know about his legendary kindness on set, and Tom deflected with characteristic humility, insisting that treating people with respect wasn't kindness, it was just basic human decency. Whoopi shared a personal story about working with Tom years ago, and he listened with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions and laughing at her punchline with authentic delight. But throughout these opening 20 minutes, Joy Behar remained conspicuously quiet. While the other hosts engaged warmly with their guest, Joy sat back in her chair, observing, calculating, waiting. Those who knew her well, who had watched The View for years, recognized this pattern. Joy's silence was never peaceful. It was tactical. She was studying Tom, looking for an opening, a vulnerability, a pressure point she could exploit for maximum impact. Her pen continued its rhythmic tapping, her eyes never leaving Tom's face, and occasionally a small smile would flicker across her lips, the smile of a predator spotting prey. The other hosts seemed oblivious to the building tension. They continued their pleasant conversation, asking about Tom's family, his recent projects, his thoughts on the state of cinema. Tom answered each question with thoughtfulness and depth, never giving pat responses or promotional sound bites. He talked about his children with obvious pride, about his wife Rita with deep affection, about his craft with genuine passion. The audience was eating it up, hanging on every word from a man they had watched and loved for decades. Then, right in the middle of a story Tom was telling about a young actor who had impressed him on set, Joy struck. Tom, I have to interrupt you there, Joy said, her voice cutting through his narrative like a blade. Because there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Something that I think a lot of people are wondering about. The temperature in the studio dropped several degrees. Tom paused mid-sentence, turning his full attention to Joy with the polite focus he'd given every question that morning. But there was something different now, a slight shift in his posture, an almost imperceptible tightening around his eyes that suggested some part of him sensed what was coming. Of course, Joy, he said pleasantly, though his smile had become just a bit more measured. What would you like to know? Joy leaned forward, and that predatory smile spread fully across her face now. Well, you've spent your entire career crafting this image of being America's dad, America's nice guy, this everyman actor who just loves what he does and treats everyone with respect. But I have to ask, and I think our audience deserves to know, is any of it actually real? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. The other hosts visibly stiffened. Whoopi's eyes widened slightly. Sunny and Sarah exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even the audience seemed to collectively hold its breath, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Tom's expression didn't change dramatically, but those who knew how to read subtle human reactions could see the shift. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His hands, which had been gesturing expressively throughout the interview, now rested still on the armrests of his chair. When he spoke, his voice remained calm, but there was a new quality to it, something harder beneath the surface pleasantness. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Joy, he said carefully. Could you be more specific? Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by the tension she'd created, feeding off the discomfort radiating from everyone else on the set. Oh, come on, Tom. You're one of the smartest people in Hollywood. You know exactly what I'm asking. This whole nice guy routine, the stories about being kind to crew members, the anecdotes about helping strangers, the constant humility and decency, is it genuine, or is it the most successful PR campaign in entertainment history? The studio went dead silent. Camera operators froze mid-adjustment. A production assistant who had been walking behind the cameras stopped in her tracks. Even the audience members who had been shifting in their seats went completely still. This wasn't a provocative question designed to generate interesting conversation. This was a direct attack on the fundamental character of one of the most respected figures in American entertainment. Tom sat very still for a long moment, processing what he'd just heard. When he finally spoke, his voice remained controlled, but there was steel in it now. Joy, I've always appreciated that you ask tough questions, but I'm not sure what you're hoping to accomplish with this particular line of inquiry. I'm hoping for honesty, Joy shot back immediately. I'm hoping that someone will finally admit what everyone in this industry knows, that the persona celebrities present to the public is almost never the real person. That nice is a marketing strategy, not a personality trait. Tom's eyes narrowed slightly. And you think that applies to me specifically? I think it applies to everyone in Hollywood, Joy said, though her focus never wavered from Tom. But you're particularly interesting because you've made an entire career out of being relatable, out of being the good guy. How much of Tom Hanks the person actually exists in Tom Hanks the brand? Whoopi tried to intervene. Joy, maybe we should... No, it's fine, Tom said, though his voice had an edge now that hadn't been there before. Joy clearly has something she wants to say. Let's hear it. Let's hear what Joy really thinks about me. Joy smiled, clearly believing she'd gotten under his skin in a way that would make for great television. What I think, Tom, is that nobody gets to your level of success. Nobody maintains your level of popularity for 40 years without being a lot more calculated than you let on. I think the aw shucks routine is exactly that, a routine. And I think the American public deserves to see behind the curtain. The other hosts were squirming now, looking at each other with expressions that said, someone needs to stop this. But nobody quite knew how. Tom Hanks was their guest, one of the most beloved figures in entertainment, and Joy was attacking him with a ferocity typically reserved for politicians or controversial public figures. Tom leaned forward slightly, his hands still resting on the armrests, but now gripping them with enough force that his knuckles were beginning to show white. Joy, let me make sure I understand what you're suggesting. You're saying that my behavior over 4 decades, the way I treat crew members, the way I interact with fans, the way I conduct myself professionally, all of that is fake, an act, a calculated performance. I'm saying it's convenient, Joy replied, her voice getting sharper. I'm saying it's awfully convenient that all these stories about how nice you are always seem to make it into the press. That's not organic kindness, that's public relations. Tom's laugh was short and bitter, a sound that caught everyone off guard. You think I call photographers when I help someone change a tire on the side of the road? You think I have my publicist alert the media when I pay for someone's meal at a restaurant? You think there's a PR strategy behind taking time to talk to crew members about their families. I think everything a celebrity does is calculated on some level, Joy insisted. Whether you're conscious of it or not, you know that being nice is part of your brand. You know that these stories maintain your image, and I think it's time someone called that out. That was when something shifted in Tom's eyes. The man who had played heroes and everymen, who had brought audiences to tears and to laughter, who had become a symbol of decency in an indecent world, was done being polite. You want to call something out, Joy? Tom's voice was still quiet, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the studio lean forward. Then let's call something out. Let's talk about what you're really doing here. Joy's smile faltered slightly, but she pressed on. I'm asking questions that journalists should be asking, if that makes you uncomfortable. Uncomfortable? Tom's voice rose slightly for the first time. You think this is about being uncomfortable, Joy? I've been asked tough questions my entire career. I've been interviewed by journalists who actually know how to challenge someone without assassinating their character. What you're doing right now isn't journalism. It's something else entirely. The air in the studio was electric now. The audience sat frozen, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Camera operators adjusted their angles, making sure they captured every second of what was unfolding. In the control room, producers were undoubtedly having frantic conversations about how to handle this situation. Joy tried to regain control. Oh, so now I'm not a real journalist. That's your defense, attack the person asking the questions. I'm not attacking you, Tom said, his voice steady but intense. I'm pointing out that there's a difference between asking tough questions and questioning someone's fundamental character based on nothing but your own cynicism. It's not cynicism, Joy shot back. It's skepticism. It's not buying into the fairy tale that Hollywood sells us. Tom stood up, not aggressively, not with sudden movement that would startle anyone, but with a deliberate, powerful motion that immediately changed the dynamic in the room. Standing at his full height, looking down at the panel, he commanded attention in a way that sitting hadn't allowed. You want to talk about fairy tales? Joy! His voice boomed through the studio now, loud and clear and filled with an intensity nobody had ever heard from Tom Hanks. Let's talk about the fairy tale you're selling, the fairy tale that says goodness can't be real, that kindness must have ulterior motives, that anyone who tries to be decent must be hiding something. That's the fairy tale. Joy. That's the fantasy. The belief that everyone is as bitter and cynical as you are? Joy's face flushed red. How dare you? No. The single word from Tom carried such authority that Joy actually stopped mid-sentence. You've had your turn to question me, to attack my character, to suggest that my entire life is a performance. Now you're going to sit there and listen to what I have to say. The studio was absolutely silent except for Tom's voice. Even the usual ambient sounds, the soft hum of equipment, the rustle of movement seemed to have disappeared, as if the entire building was holding its breath. You want to know what's real? Joy! Tom's voice was controlled fury now, each word precisely delivered. I'll tell you what's real. What's real is that I've worked in this industry for over 40 years, and I've seen every kind of person you can imagine. I've seen genuinely kind people. I've seen calculating manipulators. I've seen everything in between. And you know what I've learned? The people who are most convinced that kindness is fake are usually the people who have the hardest time being kind themselves. Joy tried to interrupt, but Tom wasn't finished. You sit at this table every single day, and you tear people down for entertainment. You take complex human beings and reduce them to targets for your commentary. You question motives. You attack character. You create controversy where none needs to exist. And you tell yourself it's journalism. You tell yourself you're just asking the tough questions, but what you're really doing is spreading poison. That is completely unfair, Joy started, but Tom cut her off. Unfair. His voice rose even louder. You want to talk about unfair? What's unfair is sitting across from someone you've never met, someone you know nothing about beyond what you've seen on screen, and accusing them of being a fraud. What's unfair is questioning whether someone's kindness is real based on nothing but your own inability to believe that kindness exists. Sonny tried to intervene. Tom, maybe we should all just take a breath. No, Tom said firmly, his eyes never leaving Joy. No more breathing, no more stepping back, no more being polite while someone attacks everything I am and everything I stand for. Joy wanted honesty, she's gonna get it. He turned his full attention back to Joy, who was now gripping her pen so tightly it looked like it might snap. You know what your problem is, Joy? You've spent so much time being cynical, so much time looking for the worst in people, that you've lost the ability to recognize genuine goodness when you see it. It's like you're colorblind, but instead of not seeing colors, you can't see decency. I am not cynical, Joy protested, her voice shaking slightly. I'm realistic. I'm honest about how the world actually works. Tom's laugh was sharp and humorless. Honest. You think cynicism is honesty. You think assuming the worst about everyone is realism. Let me tell you what's real. Joy. What's real is that every single day, millions of people around the world do kind things for each other with no ulterior motive. Parents sacrifice for their children. Strangers help each other. People choose compassion over cruelty. That's real. That's what actually happens in the world. Your version of reality, where everyone is selfish and calculating, that's not realism. That's just your damaged worldview being projected onto everyone else. The other host looked absolutely stricken. This wasn't just uncomfortable, this was devastating. Tom Hanks, the man who never said a harsh word about anyone, was systematically dismantling Joy Behar on live television, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Joy's face was completely red now, her voice getting shriller as she tried to defend herself. You don't know anything about my worldview. You don't know anything about me. You're right, Tom said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. I don't know you, but I know what you just did to me. I know that you invited me on this show, smiled to my face, and then ambushed me with accusations designed to make me look like a fraud. I know that you took a lifetime of trying to be a good person and reduced it to a PR strategy, and I know that you did all of this on national television because you thought it would be entertaining. He paused, letting his words sink in. So maybe I don't know you, Joy, but I know what you're capable of, and that's enough. Joy tried one more time to turn the tables. This is rich. You're having a complete meltdown on my show, and somehow I'm the bad guy. Tom's eyes blazed. Meltdown. You think this is a meltdown? No, Joy. A meltdown is irrational. A meltdown is disproportionate. This is proportionate. This is the exact appropriate response to having your character attacked without cause or justification. He leaned forward slightly, his voice intense but controlled. You want to see the real Tom Hanks? Here he is. I'm someone who tries every single day to be kind, to be decent, to treat people with respect. I'm someone who has worked his entire adult life in an industry that can be cruel and heartless, and I've tried to be neither of those things. I'm someone who believes that how you treat people matters, that kindness isn't weakness, that decency isn't a marketing strategy. His voice grew stronger with each statement. I'm someone who has lost friends to addiction, to AIDS, to cancer, to suicide, and who still believes the world is fundamentally good. I'm someone who has been knocked down by life, by loss, by failure, and who gets up every time and keeps trying to do better. I'm someone who thinks that when you have success, when you have a platform, when you have influence, you have a responsibility to use it to lift others up, not tear them down. The studio was absolutely mesmerized. This wasn't just a defense, this was a manifesto. This was Tom Hanks laying bare his entire philosophy, his entire approach to life, with a passion and intensity that was both shocking and completely authentic. And yes, Joy, Tom continued, his voice now carrying righteous anger. I'm someone who is absolutely furious right now. Furious that I have to defend basic human decency as if it's some kind of scam. Furious that kindness has become so rare that people like you can't even recognize it when they see it. Furious that I spent 40 years trying to set a good example, trying to show that you can be successful without being ruthless, that you can be powerful without being cruel. And here you are suggesting it's all fake. Joy was visibly shaken now, but she made one last desperate attempt. All I'm saying is that the public has a right to know who their heroes really are. Then let them know. Tom's voice thundered through the studio. Let them know that their heroes are human beings who try their best every single day. Let them know that being kind is a choice, not a scam. Let them know that treating people with respect isn't calculated, it's character. Let them know that the alternative to kindness isn't realism, it's cruelty dressed up as honesty. He straightened up, his full height towering over the seated panel. But you know what? You're not going to tell them that, are you, Joy? Because that doesn't fit your narrative. That doesn't create the controversy you need for ratings. So instead, you'll keep doing what you do, questioning people's motives, attacking their character, spreading the message that goodness is fake and only cynicism is real. Tom took a deep breath, visibly trying to regain some composure. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but it carried even more power. Do you know what the saddest part of all this is? Joy. It's not that you attacked me. I can handle that. I've been in this business long enough to handle criticism. The saddest part is what you're doing to everyone watching this show. He turned slightly, addressing not just the studio audience but the camera, speaking directly to the millions watching at home. You're telling them not to trust kindness. You're telling them that when they see someone doing good, they should be suspicious. You're teaching them that cynicism is wisdom and skepticism is intelligence. You're making the world a harder, colder, more suspicious place. And you're doing it all from behind a desk, with a microphone, with a platform that reaches millions. Turning back to Joy, his expression was one of profound disappointment. That's the real damage here. Joy, not what you said to me, but what you're teaching people about how to view the world. Joy's voice was barely above a whisper now. I'm just doing my job. Tom shook his head slowly. No, no, that's the excuse. That's what you tell yourself so you can sleep at night. But your job, a real journalist's job, is to inform, to enlighten, to help people understand their world better. What you did today wasn't journalism. It was character assassination disguised as skeptical inquiry. And the worst part, you know the difference. He reached for his jacket, which he draped over the back of his chair. The gesture was casual, but everyone in the studio recognized it for what it was, the preparation to leave. Tom Hanks was walking out of an interview, something he had never, ever done in 4 decades of public life. You know what, Joy, he said quietly as he pulled on his jacket. I came here today excited to talk about my work, to share some stories, to have a good conversation. I've been on The View before. I've always enjoyed it. But you turned this into something ugly, something mean-spirited, something designed not to illuminate but to humiliate. And I won't participate in that. Whoopi found her voice, sounding almost desperate. Tom, please, we didn't mean for this to... I know you didn't. Whoopi, Tom said gently, his kindness toward her a stark contrast to how he'd been speaking to Joy. This isn't on you. This isn't on any of you except Joy. And I genuinely hope that after the cameras stop rolling, you'll all have a conversation about what just happened here and why it never should have happened. He turned to face Joy one final time. She was sitting very still now, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as they gripped her notepad. For all her bluster, for all her aggressive questioning, she looked small now, diminished by the encounter she had initiated. Joy, Tom said, his voice now sad rather than angry. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope this was worth it to you, the drama, the controversy, the ratings you'll probably get from this. I hope it fills whatever emptiness made you think this was a good idea. He paused, then added quietly, but I suspect it won't. Because people who spend their time tearing others down are never satisfied. There's always another target, always another person to question, always another character to attack. And that's a miserable way to live. With that, Tom Hanks walked off the set of The View. The cameras followed him as he moved past the stunned production crew, past the frozen audience, toward the exit. He didn't storm off. There was no dramatic flourish, no slammed doors, no theatrical exit. He simply walked away with the same quiet dignity he'd brought to everything he'd ever done. Behind him, the studio remained in absolute shock. Joy sat at the table, her mouth slightly open, staring at the space where Tom had been sitting. The other hosts looked at each other, clearly unsure how to proceed. The audience was silent, processing what they'd just witnessed. In the control room, producers were likely having panic attacks about how to edit this footage, whether they could salvage the rest of the show, what the fallout would be. But none of that mattered in that moment. What mattered was that Tom Hanks, America's dad, Hollywood's nice guy, the man who had spent 40 years being unfailingly kind and professional, had finally reached his limit. And when he did, he didn't become cruel or petty or vindictive. He became truthful. He became passionate. He became real. What started as Joy Behar's attempt to expose Tom Hanks as a fraud became instead an exposure of her own approach to the world, cynical, suspicious, incapable of accepting that goodness can exist without ulterior motives. She had tried to tear down a legend and ended up revealing far more about herself than about her target. The confrontation would be talked about for months, analyzed by media critics, debated on social media, replayed on news shows around the world. Some would say Joy was just doing her job, asking the tough questions. Others would say she crossed a line, attacking someone's character without justification. But everyone who watched it would remember the moment when Tom Hanks stood up, looked directly at his accuser, and defended not just himself but the very concept of kindness in a cynical world. Was Joy Behar right to question Tom Hanks' authenticity, or did she go too far in attacking one of Hollywood's most beloved figures? The answer, perhaps, lies in what happened after the cameras finally stopped rolling when Joy had to sit at that table, surrounded by colleagues who had just watched her get completely dismantled, and ask herself whether creating that controversy was really worth the price she paid for it.